2016, there were only 6,500 members of the Democratic Socialists of America. In 2017, there were 23,700, and by July of 2018, there are 44,000 members of the Democratic Socialists of America, 216 chapters across the country, and particularly buoyed by young people.
Yeah.
So explain, in your view, what it is about democratic socialism that appeals to millennials and young people.
Well, I think that for our generation, we kind of view the world through a very different lens. In my life, for example, I was born in 1989, and so at that point, I was growing up during the Clinton era. And then basically when I was in middle school, 9/11 happened. So when you think about young people, it's important to think about the general timeline, the world that we grew up in. I was about 17, 18 years old when the financial crisis hit. We never experienced really a time of true economic prosperity in the United States. And a lot of what we have witnessed is the unprecedented concentration of wealth at the very top, tippy top of the 1%. And we've seen the consolidation of corporations start to really erode our wages, really erode access to health care. And so I think young people are very receptive to a very strong economic message of dignity for working class Americans.
That was really your rallying cry in your campaign. It was always about working class Americans. You talk about the top versus the bottom, not the left versus the right.
Right.
Now, the economy is going pretty strong, right? There's roughly 4% unemployment, 3.9% unemployment. Do you think that capitalism has failed to deliver for working class Americans, or is no longer the best vehicle for working class Americans?
Well, I think the numbers that you just talked about is part of the problem, right? Because we look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything is fine, right? Well, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Unemployment is low because people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely feed their kids. And so I do think that right now, when we have this no-holds-barred, Wild West hyper-capitalism, what that means is profit at any cost. Capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world. When this country started, we were not a capitalist. We did not operate on a capitalist economy.
The benefit of capitalism is that you engage in voluntary trade, and that because it creates value, it is the system that, unlike all the others, has lifted more people out of poverty over the course of human history than any other system.
Well, so I think that those things that you talk about, that you discuss, are part of the course of human evolution. And so I would hope that the most recent economic system, our current economic system, is the one that is most beneficial for everyday people. But what we're also starting to see is that, first of all, I think that when we talk about socialist or especially democratically socialist economies. First of all, they're done with the full input of everybody. You vote. It's democratic. So if something is not a good idea, it doesn't get voted for, ideally. And the other thing, too, is that we're starting to see that the people who create value in society are not experiencing any portion of the value that they are creating. And so I do think that absolutely capitalism was the most efficient and best economy, perhaps, for the time that it was at, perhaps. But as we evolve, as automation begins to really take out extremely large industries, we need to say that we're not going to throw those people away.
So in the context of democratic socialism then, do you think it calls for an end to capitalism?
Ultimately, we are marching towards progress on this issue. I do think that we are going to see an evolution in our economic system of an unprecedented degree, and it's hard to say what direction that takes. You know, I joke
but it sounds you're skeptical that capitalism is going to continue to be the right answer.
Yeah, I think it's at least a question. I think it's absolutely a question.
One of the first guests ever to appear on Firing Line was a gentleman by the name of Michael Harrington, who was the man who was behind Lyndon Baines Johnson's War on Poverty, and he wrote The Other America, and he was also the initial organizer of Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee, which preceded the Democratic Socialists of America. So I have a really fun clip from that show that I'd like to show us, and then we'll comment on the backside. Let's take a look.
Absolutely.
I don't like capitalism. I think it's much less than, well, I think it's a mythological system in that we talk of free enterprise, but we have gigantic concentrated corporations. But I agree that it is exactly the magnificent accomplishments of American enterprise and capitalism and business and the kind of dog-eat-dog misery that we went through that now makes it possible for us to be decent. And I think that when we finally do get a modicum of justice in the society, we should revere those dog-eat-doggers who did make it possible.
Well, perhaps contempt was too strong a word to describe your feelings on capitalism. I was struck by that sense of yours which goes, practically every ethical, moral, and cultural justification for the capitalist system has now been destroyed by capitalism, which some people would find contemptuous at least.
You can see Buckling and Harrington mixing it up 50 years ago, more than 52 years ago, about the values that you and I are still trading back and forth.